When I made my Sadako guide a few months ago, I included my overall tier list for all killer perks when used by Sadako specifically. Here's my current tier list with those perks. There's some updated placements from when I showed this in the Sadako guide, notably Fire Up, which I now love to pair with Brute of Strength, also with Oppression and Surveillance. At the time, Dracula was the most recently released killer, and since Dracula there's been one and soon to be two new killers in the game, with new perks of course to consider. That's what we'll be doing today. While Kaneki will get his time once I've had a bit of time to play around with his perks when he's released, here we'll be talking about the most recent fully released killer, the Houndmaster, and her 3 perks, All Shaking Thunder, No Quarter, and Scourge Hook Jagged Compass. The first one we'll talk about is All Shaking Thunder. All Shaking Thunder activates when you fall from any height. It'll then be active for 16 seconds, during which all of your lunge attacks will have a plus 75% increase in range. After the 16 seconds are up, All Shaking Thunder will go on cooldown for 5 seconds. The first thing we all think of when we see this perk, especially us Sadako players, is Coup de Grace, since Coup de Grace is a strong perk for Sadako overall. All Shaking Thunder's numbers are only slightly worse than Coup de Grace's, being plus 75% lunge range as opposed to Coup de Grace's plus 80%. This difference is mostly negligible in comparison though. What's more interesting to consider is their consistency and their activation when comparing the two. If you saw my overview of Coup de Grace in my Sadako guide, I mentioned that I personally dislike using it since you have to rely on the survivors completing gens to be able to use it at all, and even then you could only use it a limited number of times, 10 maximum in any given losing game. All Shaking Thunder may seem a bit better in this case since you activate it yourself. You don't have to rely on the survivors progressing the game to get value here. Also, the cooldown is very forgiving, so when you do want to activate this perk you almost always have the opportunity to do so. Almost being the key word. This, unfortunately, is fairly map dependent. You need to be on a map that has many drop locations. While all maps have drop points, usually in the form of hills on outdoor maps, some maps have very specific drop-down locations, like on Larry's, with the only drop-down location being in the main room's viewing area. So when you want to get value out of this, you have to manually find a drop point, then drop, giving you the 16 seconds to then make a play with it. This, unfortunately, is just simply not a lot of time for Sadako. Sadako's best use case of extended lunge range is post-projection swings, projecting to a TV near a survivor and then flying at them with a mix of the speed boost post-projection and the lunge range increase from All Shaking Thunder. The tricky part for All Shaking Thunder is projecting to a TV that actually has a survivor nearby within the 16 seconds of activating All Shaking Thunder. If you project somewhere else that has no one nearby, then all the time that you spent activating All Shaking Thunder is wasted. If you do get a good projection, then you will get pretty great value out of this though. With Coup de Grace, however, you are not limited to this 16-second window, nor do you have to worry about activating it before projecting. You'll either have it ready or you won't, depending on your tokens. Despite my gripes with Coup de Grace's activation, this is simply the more consistent option for Sadako. Another issue with the 16-second window is that a couple of those seconds are spent simply crawling out of a TV, so you actually have a decent amount less time to identify the TV that you want to project to. Another thing to consider here is how to identify where to project naturally. The best method I would say certainly is using her add-on remote control, since you will consistently physically see survivors near gens with their auras, which will also help you swing around corners post-projection since you'll see their auras hiding around the corners. Without remote control or any other info perks though, you'll have to rely on your own developed killer instincts of where survivors are likely to be at any given time. If you do use remote control like I almost always do, you'd want to have an initial projection to a TV that you don't think anyone is near to reveal anybody near the other TVs around the map. If using All Shaking Thunder, you'll either have to activate this between those two projections, which wastes your remote control or reveal time, or you'll have to initially activate it before projecting the first time, but then you spend most, if not all, of the 16-second window projecting to find survivors to hit with the extended lunge. All in all Shaking Thunder is still good when you get it working, although it is inconsistent when compared to Coup de Grace. I wouldn't consider this to be unreliable. When it comes to my Sadako perk tier list, I would rank All Shaking Thunder as average. While not a bad choice to use, I would consider this to be completely overshadowed by Coup de Grace. Here's where I'd place All Shaking Thunder on my current tier list. I'm not quite done talking about All Shaking Thunder though. With Coup de Grace in existence, it is only natural to also consider how good using both of them would be. Playing in the background here are all the instances of post-projection lunges, with and without Bloody Fingernails, with and without All Shaking Thunder, and with and without Coup de Grace, with all necessary combinations of the three in there as well. For all instances, I try to start my swing when I get to the pallet here in Ormond's main building, and then I aim my swing towards that front door, seeing how far my lunge brings me each time. We can see that Coup de Grace is slightly better, which is expected from the numbers, and we also see that combined, these two perks give a significant distance increase, which is quite amazing. But would it actually be worth running these two together? I would certainly say not. Not only would you have to worry about both of their unfortunate activation requirements, but you're also simply eating up a perk slot that you could use for something else, while still getting good lunge benefits from using just one of them. Next up on the Houndmaster list is No Quarter. While using No Quarter, anytime a survivor is healing themselves, either with a medkit or with their perk Self-Care, when they reach 75% progress on their heal bar, they are faced with continuous skill checks. If any of these are failed, or if they stop healing during this time for whatever the reason may be, they will become broken for 30 seconds. This of course is very similar to Merciless Storm from Sadako herself. And just like Merciless Storm, No Quarter suffers from the same underlying issue, being that the better you are, the less value you will get out of this perk. This is simply because you'll be paired with stronger survivors who will be very unlikely to miss skill checks. The only reliable way of getting value for either of these perks is by interrupting the survivors affected directly. This does mean, for No Quarter at least, that a Nurse's Calling is quite a good perk to pair with it, which is already a good perk for Sadako. This will help you get those interrupts. We also have to consider the activation requirements here too. No Quarter requires that a survivor heals themselves, which will almost always be through a medkit. Medkits are very common though, and I actually consider them to be the strongest item to use against Sadako, saving a lot of that healing time, being able to heal alone, and also significantly lowering the hit and run pressure that Sadako otherwise would have. So you are likely to get this activated quite a few times per match. We have to of course compare this to Merciless Storm's activation requirements, being at every gen's near completion. So Merciless Storm is guaranteed to activate at least 5 times in a losing match. So, is the 20 seconds gen block time for Merciless Storm better than the 30 seconds of broken time on the survivors for No Quarter? I would say Merciless Storm's effects are much better than No Quarter's. The reason is that the gen blocking will always give you some extra time to make some plays. The broken time, however, will only benefit you if you happen to find that survivor who's broken. If you don't, then they can simply spend those 30 seconds sat on a gen, wasting no time at all outside of the partial self-heal time before. That being said, I would consider No Quarter as weak for Sadako. It is both very unreliable and very underwhelming in terms of benefits to Sadako. Here's where I'd place it on the list. Last up for the Houndmaster is her third perk, Scourge Hook Jagged Compass. Just like all the other Scourges, Jagged Compass will make 4 random hooks on the map become Scourge hooks at the start. When you hook a survivor on one of these Scourge hooks, you will see the aura of the generator with the most progress in yellow instead of red for 10 seconds. The more interesting part is the second part though. When a survivor is unhooked from a normal, non-Scourge hook, that hook then becomes a Scourge hook permanently. This is a win-win for hooking. Either you will get info on where pressure is immediately needed if hooked on a Scourge hook, or you will create more Scourge hooks if hooked on a normal hook. This is probably my favorite Scourge hook perk in the game. But is it good for Sadako? It would heavily benefit from having other Scourge hook perks so that you get their benefits as well, and make their benefits easier to achieve later in the match by making more Scourge hooks. Sadako's own Floods of Rage and Pinhead's Gift of Pain have some unique interactions with Jagged Compass in that they activate on unhook instead of hook, meaning that they will always activate on every unhook in the game. Both of these actually give Sadako great benefits in information and heal and gen slowdown. Using all of these, though, would take up at least 3 out of our 4 precious perk slots, all dedicated to hooking here. Is that good for Sadako? I wouldn't say so. While hooking is good to lock in condemned stacks, of course, you won't always have stacks to lock in when you down somebody. In these instances, I actually prefer to slug to maintain pressure, saving the hooks for condemn lock-in opportunities. This lets Sadako have more time for spreading condemnation, which I'd argue is more important for winning games than hooking would be. Unless, of course, the down survivor that you just got down is dead on hook. This style of play does not synergize well with Scourge hooks, unfortunately. If you do want to use a Scourge hook build, though, I would recommend using Jagged Compass, Floods of Rage, and Gift of Pain at least, and probably also Pain Resonance as the cherry on top to it. All in all, I do think that Jagged Compass is good, though I would say it works well in a dedicated build. I would not use this solo like I may do with Floods of Rage, for instance, but it is welcome in any combination of Scourge hook perk builds. Here's where I'd place this on my list. Well, that'll be all for now. A similar thing will likely be in the works for Kaneki's perks when the time comes for him. Let me know if you agree or disagree with my opinions on the Houndmaster's perks here, though. I'll see you again some other time.